Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. Hey, so I've been thinking about how starting over sounds so easy in our heads, right? Like a fresh page, a new beginning, a reset. Like you just close one door and walk through another, and everything just feels lighter. And you wake up, and suddenly you're like this brand new version of you. But in real life, starting over usually doesn't feel so easy at all. In fact, it feels messy and raw and uncertain. And sometimes it even feels embarrassing because you don't want to admit you're back at the beginning, or that you're rebuilding again, or that the thing you thought would work just it didn't. And I think a lot of women are quietly living in this place right now where on the outside you're functioning and showing up and doing what needs to get done, but inside you're asking yourself, okay, how do I start again? And from here, how do I begin again? And when I'm just tired, I'm so tired and exhausted and just over all this. How do I want something new without feeling like I'm betraying everything I've done up to this point? How do I become a new version of myself when I've been holding on to a version for so long that it feels like identity pause, break, crisis? Who knows? But anyway, starting over, it isn't just about our circumstances changing. It's not just about a new plan or a new routine or a new goal. Starting over, it's serious. It's some heavy stuff. And it comes with a lot of emotional weight. And starting over, it's spiritual. It's starting over is an identity level. Because if you don't shift who you believe you are, you'll drag the same patterns into a new season and then wonder why it still feels heavy. You could change your calendar and live in this place of pressure, or you could change your relationship status and still live in fear. And you could change your job and still live in proving. You could change your body and still live in shame. But the point is that starting over, like really starting over, it's not just this external exchange, like you're going to snap your fingers and have this different life. It's very real. It's internal. And it's a return. It's a return to who you are. And it's a surrender. And it's a coming home. And there's a verse that anchors me when I'm in this in-between place where I know God is inviting me into something new, but I can feel the pull of whatever's familiar, even if what's familiar isn't what's best for me. And that's 2 Corinthians 5:17. And it says, if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation. The old has passed away and the new has come. And I love that verse because it doesn't say if anyone is in Christ, they become a new creation once everything in their life is perfect. Nope, not at all. It doesn't say that the new comes when you have more money or more energy or more certainty or more support or you have mastered and perfected your life. Nope, not at all. It says in Him you are new, which means your starting over doesn't start with you manufacturing and manifesting a whole new life through force, through perfection, through performance. It doesn't say any of that. It starts with you letting God redefine you from the inside out. And I want to talk about this the way that we talk, because what I'm saying is this collective voice that I'm hearing from so many of you, and even from my own lived and learned experiences, is that it's sometimes this whole starting over, I think sometimes we romanticize about it. Like, what if we could just start over and wipe the slate clean? Everything would be so much better. Well, that might be a start and a fantasy that you might want to embark on, and hopefully everything ends in paints that picture, but we know that that's not the reality of it. Because when we romanticize about starting over, or we act like it's just a simple mindset shift, and then all of a sudden we just feel so disconnected from that vision or that fantasy or that illusion because it's not reality. And it takes a lot of work to get there. And that's why we talk about growth and becoming and this journey, because there's so much that we are learning throughout these little steps that it takes for us to even get there. And sometimes it could feel like it hurts. There's a lot of pain. That's why it's called growing pains. Or when it feels scary, or when it feels like you're walking into a fog and you can't see 5 steps ahead. But that's often how it goes. That's often the real beginning. It's definitely not a perfect plan, and it's not a clear map. It's a willingness to stop pretending you're fine with what no longer fits. And that's the truth. And unfortunately, I've learned this the hard way. But then, I say unfortunately, but the reality is, would I change my life? I don't know. There's pieces and elements and things I wish didn't happen. But I think, in all honesty, I'm grateful for the woman I am becoming. And there's so much that comes out of all of our pain, our past, our traumas, our dramas, our experiences, even all the good stuff too. We learned so much of that. And even if life was just so perfect and joyful and happy and all the things, well, we know that that is just temporary too, because life is nothing but a vapor. It's all temporary. So if we have our ups, it's a matter of when those downs will come. And so, we live in both spaces and places, I guess. I mean, we can't have one experience without the other. That's just the truth of where it is. And so, when I say that I've learned this, I really have. I've learned this the hard way, and I mean this with my whole heart, because I'm someone who has reinvented and rebuilt and recalibrated more than once. And I've watched how tempting it is to cling to what used to work or to who you were. And sometimes that's because, even though it could still sometimes feel aligned, but deep down it's not right. It's not who you are, and it's not known. It feels uncomfortable at times. And it feels that like the proof that you can do these hard things, and it feels like sometimes you want to just retreat back to safety, because that's where it's comfortable, that's where it's predictable, that's where it's known. And it feels like, well, at least I know how to be her. Like, you had control, you understood how that stuff worked. It's the letting go of that version and letting go of that life. And that's where so much of this uncertainty and unknown comes from. And it's quite scary. It is. But there's a moment, and you probably know what I mean, where you realize you're living in 2 lives at once. Like, you're just straddling both who you were, and yet being pulled in the direction of who you're becoming. And you're trying to hold on to that old version of yourself that maybe got you applause or approval, or got you results or acceptance, or it got you some version of success, but it's not you anymore. And then there's this new version of you that you could feel like a little whisper, like this tug of war, right? Like, come on. Like something God is growing in you, but you don't fully know her yet. And that unknown is what makes starting over feel terrifying, because you're like, what if I step out of this old and the new doesn't work out? What if I release what I now know and I can't build what I'm being called to build? But what if I let go? And what if I fall? What if I fail? What if I have to start all over again and again and again? And the truth is, it's okay. You've done it before. You're here. And this is where I've had to learn the difference between uncertainty and danger, because uncertainty feels scary, but it's not always unsafe. Sometimes uncertainty is simply the space where faith has to breathe. Sometimes uncertainty is where God is asking you to walk with Him, not ahead of Him, not behind Him, with Him. And I know if you're like, where's the plan? If you like to have control and you're the one who likes to know what's next, and you could feel like sometimes it just feels like torture because you're like, okay, put me in with the GPS, put the end destination in. Just want to kick back, sit back, and chill and enjoy this ride. But that's not how this works. God doesn't always show you the whole blueprint. And oftentimes He's like, no, I'll show you the next step if you stay close. And you're like, dang, all right, I will. And even though sometimes it's the hardest part, it's just not just of the surrender, but the trust. And it's not so much of you saying, like, well, I don't trust God. Maybe sometimes you don't trust yourself to feel safe to where you're at, to know that He's got you and you can't fall and you cannot fail. So starting over for me, it's rarely looked like this big dramatic, like, moment, right? I mean, there has been. We've talked about that on the show as well. But it's usually these like quiet little breaks and like fractures and these little subtle chips away that happen over time slowly. And the next thing you know, your life is just different. You feel different. You look around and you're like, well, what is this? This can't be it. Like something has changed. And that's what I'm saying. It's like having those series of honest admissions to yourself. Like, I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I'm living. I don't like that all this change and what it's doing to my body, my mind, my spirit. I don't like how disconnected I've become from myself. I don't like how I'm showing up in relationships. I don't like how my health is slipping. I don't like how I'm building a life that feels responsible on the outside, but feels empty and alone on the inside. And those admissions don't always come with an instant fix. Sometimes they just come with a decision, with the admission to say, okay, I just can't keep living like this. And that's where starting over begins. Not with all this BS and hype and all this crap that we see and hear, but it comes through honesty and truth and conviction. And the first thing I want you to know, especially if you're listening and you're in this starting over season, is that starting over doesn't mean you failed. It means you're awake. You're here. It means you're paying attention. It means you're willing to change. And it means that you're brave enough to admit that the old way wasn't working anymore. And honestly, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because here's the thing. We change. We evolve. We grow. And if you're trying to force your life to keep fitting a version of you that's already grown, it'll feel like friction. It'll feel like burnout. It will feel like resentment. It will feel like that low-grade gas sadness that you can't fully name, but you know it's there. And a lot of women ignore that feeling for years because they're like, well, I should be grateful. I should be happy. I should be fine. Look at what I built. Look at what I have. Look at what I've survived. And yes, gratitude does matter, but gratitude doesn't mean you don't get to grow. Gratitude doesn't mean that you don't get to become. And gratitude doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in what's familiar. So when you're starting over, one of the biggest shifts is this. You stop looking at your past as proof that you can't change. And you start looking at your past as evidence that you can survive and still begin again. Because you've already done the hard thing. You've already lived through chapters and seasons you didn't think you'd even get through. You've already made it through nights that felt endless. You've already endured disappointment and heartbreak and uncertainty and fear and stress and pressure. and you're still here. And that matters. And that's not small. That's just part of your foundation. But starting over, it also requires something else. And this is where a lot of us get stuck. It requires letting go, not just of things, but of identities. It requires letting go of the version of you that was built on survival, the version of you that was built out of people pleasing, the version of you that learned to be the strong one because nobody else was going to save you, the version of you that learned to be hyper independent because trusting people hurt too much, the version of you that learned to strive because resting felt unsafe, the version of you that learned to perform because being you fully just didn't feel welcome. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to release isn't just a relationship or a job or a habit. It's the role you've been playing. And I'm telling you, if you don't release the role, you can change everything else and still feel trapped. That's why that anchor verse matters so much more to me, even in these seasons as I'm becoming, because it reminds me that the new isn't something I hustle my way to. It's something I receive through surrender. In Christ, you are new creation, which means you begin again without begging for permission. You could begin again without punishing yourself, and again without waiting until you feel fully ready. You could begin because God is already doing something new in you. And I know there's a woman listening who's thinking, okay, but what does this look like in real life? Like, practically? Well, it looks like you stop trying to rebuild your whole life in one day, because starting over doesn't mean doing everything at once. Starting over is often boring, it's mundane, it's tedious, it's all little things that we don't like to do. And that's the foundation work. It's back to the basics. It's like, okay, I need to drink water again. I need to breathe again. I need to get out of bed. It's like doing things that just feel like every day on autopilot. But sometimes that's all it is. It's just taking that first next step. It's about needing to be that person again who takes care, who takes responsibility of themselves. Not only just the drinking water, but you eat the food, you get the sleep, you move your body, but do it in a way that honors and nourishes and not punishes. I need to stop letting my nervous system live on this high alert, right? We got to tell ourselves these things because this need to stop pretending, it's really your body is talking to you. And it's the need to stop letting every relationship take from you what you can't replenish. And it's the need to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop treating like life is a race. And we got to learn to slow down, to rest, to recover. Because when we're rebuilding and starting over again, dang, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, in every aspect of us, right? And I'm saying that because I have been that one. I've done all these things. I've tried to solve everything with more discipline, more productivity, more goals, more effort, more. That's the chase, right? And sometimes that answer isn't more. Sometimes the answer is less. Less noise, less pressure, less proving, less performing, less running, but having, in turn, more presence, more prayer, more honesty, more boundaries, more rest, and more alignment. I've also learned that starting over, it usually requires you to just, like I said, get real, raw, and honest about what you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want. And that's the part that could feel uncomfortable because a lot of us, We built our lives around shoulds. We should look responsible. It should look mature. It should look like we've got it all together. But should can also be a prison, because you can live your whole life doing what you should do and still feel like you're disappearing inside your own story. So even if you're starting over, here's a question I want you to sit with. And you don't have to answer it now or perfectly or, in your own time. But all I ask is that you answer it honestly. When you picture you, the woman you're becoming, what does she protect? What does she prioritize? What does she no longer tolerate? What does she say yes to without pressure, but with peace? What does she say no to without guilt? What does she stop carrying? Because becoming is less about adding and more about releasing. And this is where surrender becomes that doorway, that gateway to freedom. Because surrender is not giving up. Surrender is giving it back. Surrender is saying, God, I'm done. I'm done trying to build my life in my own strength. I'm done trying to control every outcome. I'm done trying to force what you're not in. I'm done trying to make my life fit into a mold that's crushing me. And I'm ready for your way. I'm ready for your timing. I'm ready for the kind of growth that doesn't destroy me. And I'm going to say something that might hit a little, but I mean it with love. Truly, I do. And that is, sometimes the reason starting over feels so hard is because you're still trying to bring the old you into this new season. You're still trying to think the same way. You're still trying to respond the same way. And you're still trying to carry the same fears. You're still trying to keep the same patterns. And you want new results. But the new results require a new you. And that's exactly what Scripture is pointing to. The old has passed away. The new has come. Which means you don't have to drag the past into the present as proof of what's possible. You don't have to keep repeating old cycles because they're familiar. And you don't have to keep being this version you've always been. You can honor who she was, and you could thank her for getting you through. But the truth is, you can still be all these things and still let her go. And I think that's what a lot of us need permission for. Just to hear that, to have this permission to change, permission to grow, and permission to start again. Permission is not be who they've always told you to be, but permission is to evolve without explaining yourself to everyone. And the permission to rebuild without feeling like you're failing. So if you need that permission today, here it is. Write yourself a slip. It's the simplest form I can give to you. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to begin again. And you're allowed to be all the things that you aspire and desire to be. And you're allowed to rewrite your life. You're allowed to become your truest and best version of yourself. And I know it could feel scary, especially if you're the one who's always had it together, or you've always been the strong one, or you've always been the one who figures things out. Because starting over can feel like you're losing that power and that control. But sometimes losing control is exactly how God gives you that peace. Because peace was never going to come through you gripping harder. Because what you hold on to will eventually hold on to you. And if you're in that thick, in this whole mess of this middle, if you're building from scratch, if you're trying to find your footing, I want you to take a break with me and just breathe. Just breathe. Take that deep, long pause. Because not everything is worth the effort. Not because we're pretending it's easy, but because we're remembering. We're remembering that what we're doing here, we're doing it alone. And even though God is with us, that He is not intimidated by your beginning. He's not disappointed in your reset. He's not rolling his eyes because you're back at step one, or that you disappointed Him, or you've let Him down. That's the guilt and that's the shame that I want you to let go of as well. And I want to remind you that He is the God of redemption. He's the God who makes all things new. He's the master and creator, and He's the God who has created the beginning and the end. He's the God who takes what feels broken and makes it beautiful in His own perfect timing. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is begin again with humility and say, okay, God, teach me how to live this life differently. Help me to teach me and lead me and guide me into your will and your way. And if you want that next step, that's simple. It's just a real starting point that you can actually follow without overcomplicating. And I want to invite you to it. And that'll be all in the show notes below. So make sure you check those out. And, if you're ready to rebuild from the inside out, it's all there. It's in a way that's rooted in faith and identity and confidence and freedom, and not from the pressure and proving and all the perfection stuff. We're over that. At least we try to, right? That's honesty. That's our goal. But just want to let you know that that's there, and that's something that I created for you because honestly, I needed it. And just go take a look at it. Choose what feels right for you in these next steps, because you don't have to do everything today, and you don't have to do everything alone. But what you do have to do is take that one honest step forward. So before I let you go, I just want to speak this over you. You are not disqualified because you're starting again. And you are not behind because you're rebuilding. And you're not too late because you're in a season where you never expected it. And you are not weak because you're tired. You're not failing because you need this fresh start. I want you to breathe again, because you are human and you are growing, and God is still writing your story. So until next time, take care and God bless.
Hey there, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.